Hello and welcome to Coffee Break, another great edition. I've just finished my espresso. I'm here with the man who drinks, I don't know how many cups of coffee a day, but it's Kim Hunter, CEO of Lagrant Communications. What have you had so far, Kim? 9 cups?
Well, as a result of COVID, as well as what I call pandemic 1 and pandemic 2, I'm not having my triple wet cappuccino at Starbucks at 6:45 in the morning because I'm homebounded. I'm here sequestered. So as a result, I drink a pot of coffee a day.
That must be difficult for you because you love getting out and about and traveling, meeting people. And tell us about your lockdown experience. How's it been? Obviously, got some nice art to look at in the background.
Well, as you know, I'm an art collector and I've been collecting art for over 25 years. But I got to be honest with you, Steve. I know Andy Plansky and I talked about a month or two ago, and he says, Kim, I travel more than you. And he said, this has been somewhat challenging. And I said, it's interesting for me. It has not been challenging. You pivot, right? We're communicators. And I tell people at the end of the day, I did not create this pandemic 1. I did not create pandemic 2, but you learn to adapt. You learn to be resilient. And at the end of the day, this has been great for me, Steve. All 3 of my enterprises are doing phenomenally well. I'm doing more cooking. I love to cook. It's my favorite hobby. I've had more clients and elected officials and key stakeholders in my home prior to pandemic 1.
Socially distanced, I hope.
No, well, I'm not doing it now. I did it prior, but it's just I love cooking and learning more techniques of perfecting my cooking skills, my culinary skills. So it's a okay scenario for me now. As you probably well know, my birthday is like an international holiday. Everybody's shocked that this year I didn't go anywhere. My birthday is June 30th, and I made a decision. It was a moment in time. Okay, 1 year I'm not out of the country. And it's a good thing because next year is my 60th birthday, so I care more about 2021.
Now everyone's just dropped their coffee because that can't be true, my friends. I mean, not looking a day over 40.
June 30th, 1961, I am a proud baby boomer. So
there you go.
Yes.
Well, let's talk about Lagrant. Obviously, you've been going 30 years with Lagrant Communications. There are since 20 years. You've got KLH, who's the recruitment firm, about 10 years. What's the ultimate mission around Lagrant and the suite of services? I know you're a great advocate for diversity and you've done some brilliant work, and we've honored you on our Hall of Fame for that. But give us your sort of potted, quick version of what your mission is.
It's real simple: to increase the number of African Americans, Hispanics, Latinx, Asian Pacific Islanders, and Native Americans in the fields of advertising, PR, and marketing. To your point, I just celebrated 30 years, September 1st, which I'm still shocked by it in so many ways. We're talking about 3 decades I've been running my first business. And I'm proud. You know my Keisha Brown. She's my president. She just celebrated 25 years with me. My vice president of finance and administration has been with me 14 years. So it speaks volumes to me, Steve, at the end of the day, to have people who've been with me through the ups and downs, because I always tell people running a business is like Wall Street. You have your ups, you have your downs. The key is sustainability. And it's been a wonderful ride. It really has been. So we're seeing impact.
And in that time, you've given through the foundation hundreds, probably thousands, I don't know, of scholarships to people of color to get into advertising, marketing, and PR. What's the things you're most proud of in terms of seeing someone go on to do great things? Can you give us some examples of some of your alum, and also just the number of people that you've got into the industry?
Absolutely. Well, first, we've awarded $2.7 million over 22 years. We've awarded over 726 scholarships over the 22 years. And we have seen people get scholarships from 1999, which was our first year we awarded scholarships. Jessica Shee is the first person that comes to mind. Jessica Shee was one of the first 10 scholarship recipients. Jessica Shee, I placed her through my executive search firm at both Verizon under Teride and under Kimberly Good at Blue Shield of California. She rises to the very top of one of my pride and joys of my career. And it's funny how things go full circle, Steve. It was Jessica Shee who referred my agency to Campbell. There is a person of color who is the chief marketing officer there, Linda Lee, and Linda asked her, who is out there? You had introduced me to this guy named Kim Hunter years ago, we really need to bring him on board of what's going on with the racial inequalities in America. And she did. And as a result, that was because of a relationship I built and nurtured over literally 21 of the 22 years. So Jessica is one of my prime joys. Another one who you probably know, Bjorn. Bjorn is at Facebook now. Bjorn was at Heineken. He was
Bjorn Traore, yeah?
Yeah, he is a pride joy of mine. He was a two-time scholarship recipient from Penn State University. He then went to Edelman for 7 years, and then he went to another Fortune 500. Then he went to Heineken, took a break, went to Facebook. To see where he is today is a joy. And another one is Debbie Imabolo, who is at Coca-Cola. She's the director of financial communications at Coca-Cola. She was a two-time scholarship recipient, a pride joy. I'm just so proud. I'm like a proud papa. I don't have kids, never wanted kids, but to see these kids of mine really see where they are in their careers and they give back, Steve. They not only earned a scholarship, got internships, got placements, but then gave back to the foundation. And that's the biggest joy of my career.
So they're sending the elevator back down.
Absolutely.
Now, a lot of the people you mentioned there are on the client side, but let's talk about the agency world, because we've done a lot of coverage at PR Week. We've seen about the lack of black faces and black and people of color at the top levels of agencies. They may come in at the junior levels, but they don't see those role models that you've been talking about on the client side, and they tend to drift away. And we're still, 20 years on from really getting serious about this, waiting to see people who report into the CEO. I think there's Chris Foster at Burson Cohen Wolf. He's probably one of the exceptions. What's your take on that? Why is that still such a problem?
I wish I had a definitive answer for you, Steve, but I think it's a multitude of reasons. Agency life is very different than client life. And I can say that as somebody who's been on both sides of the fence. I spent most of my career on the agency side, but I came out of corporate. So I did the reverse of what most people do. I went from working for a Fortune 200, at that time Baxter, went to work for a small minority-owned and operated ad agency, helped build out his PR, and just made a decision. It didn't matter whether it was a Fortune 200 or a small business, I needed to be on my own. I think a lot of people of color who do enter the agency, it's not a welcoming environment. It's not an inclusive environment. It still is still a place where you see very few people of color. And what is happening now, Steve, with the whole, what I refer to as pandemic 2, many people of color are being approached to come into the agency side, right? Or leave one agency and go to another. And I was interviewing a candidate because I have 3 clients who have retained me to bring in mid to senior level ethnically diverse candidates. And one candidate said something to me that I thought was very revealing and very telling. And she said, and I quote, and she's the senior vice president of a top 10 PR firm. She said, Kim, I am no longer interested in being an experiment for these agencies. Either they get on board and stop hiring the one-off and hire in critical mass, or I'm going to be leaving and pivoting to the client side, where I tend to see more people of color that look like me, and I see more growth trajectory. And part of it, Steve, at the end of the day, when you don't see the Chris Fosters of the world, you got to ask the question, why? You and I both know that piece I wrote 4 years ago. It was something that I wanted to tell the story. What is wrong? Why is there not a Kim Hunter reporting into a CEO of these agencies? And the question is obvious. Go to the websites. You still do not see people that look like me reporting to the CEO. And I challenge all of the top 10. I think they all have great intentions. I even believe in my heart to heart, they're good people. I know most of them, if not all of them. But at the end of the day, we're no longer interested in you being nice and you're being congenial. It's really about you're going to make a difference in your enterprise, because guess what? Your clients are going to be asking for it. At the end of the day, it's the right thing to do from a business perspective. When you walk in a room servicing a client and the client's consumer base reflects more diversity than your own agency, you got to ask the question, why do I have you on my roster?
Yeah, we had Sade and Nisa from the group that is lobbying for agencies to reveal their diversity stats and percentages, because they're very reticent to do so. And one of the things that I think it was Sade said was when they do agencies, they feel they have to change their behavior and they can't be themselves because of the culture in the organization. And that seems to be what you're alluding to, that you can't be your true self and you feel like you've got to change even the way you look or the way you dress because just because of the way everyone else is and the cultural norms within that organization. So it's about changing the culture. And it's difficult to do, isn't it? Because it has to come from within. It has to be organic, and it's a very difficult to change a culture. And some would say it's impossible.
Well, I question the impossible, right? We live in the impossible. Who would have ever thought all of us would have pivoted in March to working remotely? But guess what? We made it happen. And guess what? We can still be productive and be of value to our clients. But I will tell you, Steve, I have received more phone calls from kids of color or even mid-level people of color indicating how the environment, the culture in which they're in is not at all warm and welcoming, specifically as it relates to African Americans. I think all the agencies have done a decent job of recruiting. Where they have failed miserably is the development. So you can recruit them, right? You bring them in, you recruit them, and then you train and develop them. And it's the latter of the three-part equation, retention. Why can you not retain people that look like me? They need to answer that question. It's a very painful answer, probably. And I hear stories from kids of color, and I will tell you, primarily they're African Americans calling me and saying, Kim, I have my managing supervisor that will ask the question, why is your hair like that? Why do you have your hair positioned that way? And these are things, why would somebody ask that question? One, I have always said, I remember being in grad school, and the first day of grad school, the professor asked us in the classroom, how many, and it was an international program, how many of you have friends that do not look like you? And I remember raising my hand, Steve, and the professor said, what is your name? And I said my name, and she said, you will do well in your career. And I was in my early 20s. And her point was, how can you claim to be in an international program and not have anybody that's different from you? And it's same different with, I look at the agencies. Many of the people that I interact with on the agency side, they have probably never had a Kim Hunter in their home, never had Kim Hunter sitting across from them from a dinner table or a breakfast table or a lunch table. And I asked the question, why would I expect the big boys, the top agencies, to truly have a Kim Hunter at the table reporting to a CEO when you don't even have people like me in your own personal life?
Yeah, and you mentioned Tarod Neptune earlier, who's at Lenovo. Now, one of the things he's doing, and other CCOs and chief marketing officers, is insisting on the agencies that work for them that they must be truly diverse. And they have to prove that as part of their review, as part of the pitching process. That has got to be really going to change. Is if clients just say, look, if you're not diverse, you're not working, you're not going to be a vendor for us or a partner for us. And we've got to see more executives insisting on that.
And I will tell you, Steve, I remember being interviewed by PR Week back in the 90s, the late 90s, and I was asked that question by your predecessor, asking, Kim, what do you think is going to change the landscape? And I said, until the clients who controls the revenue of the agencies, because we're all at the mercy of our clients. At the end of the day, I have revenue coming in the door. If that revenue stops coming in the door, I don't have an enterprise. Until clients say, when you win this piece of business, or even prior to winning this piece of business, you must demonstrate that your account team is as diverse as my consumer base. And if it's not, please understand you will not have my business today or even tomorrow.
Yeah. All right. Well, coffee break has flown by. We've got about a minute left. I knew it would. What do we need to see then? You mentioned pandemic 2.
Mm-hmm.
Only positive out of it is that there is more attention focused on this across business and society, and seeing changes. A lot of them are diversity and inclusion hires, but there are a lot of chief creative officers, CCOs. We were just talking about Boeing hired a black man as a CCO. We are seeing a focus, and it does feel like white people are waking up and thinking, I can't believe that my black colleague it doesn't feel safe to even get on the public transport home without being harassed or stopped, whatever. So give us an optimistic note to go out on very quickly about, how the events of the past few months might have changed perceptions and maybe lead to real action.
Well, I can be candid with you, Steve. I have never been more hopeful, optimistic. Change is abound. It is happening now. I mean, since the pandemic 2, which was in May, right? Pandemic 1 was in March. I have gotten more phone calls from corporations or agencies wanting to retain my services. And it's a good thing. And what I like to say is that it's not a one-off. I truly believe it's now going to be more long-term than short-term. And at the end of the day, I think they're all truly committed because it was a wake-up call. I cannot believe I knew this person and he was raising, in this case, like Tarad raised 3 boys, right? He has 3 boys. And that he knew every day waking up, he had a fear that his son or sons would be caught by a police officer just because they were of the color of their skin. And I think more and more people to realize that, guess what? This is true. I mean, you and I may see each other. You and I've had our, one-on-ones for coffee or a meal, but there was never an illusion that I thought I was just as equal as Steve Barrett going into a restaurant or getting in my car and not having to be worried. Guess what? It's always been a part of my life for 59 years. I have learned to work within the system to manage that. Now, that's a lot of a heavy weight on our shoulder, Steve. I'll be honest with you. It takes a lot of burden for us to carry. But at the end of the day, we had to make a choice. Do we move forward, be positive, and try to change the landscape that we can? And that's how I have always operated.
Yeah, well, I know you're always going to be positive, and that's what we love about you. So thanks for joining us. Time with coffee, and we'll see you soon, Kim. Thanks for joining.
Absolutely, Steve. Absolutely. Be safe.